Today we want to show you guys how to crush a end of the year giving campaign because it is absolutely essential for your church's health and growth and for your people's deepest discipleship.
This is Breaking Barriers, where we help pastors and churches grow so that they can go.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Breaking Barriers podcast. I'm with Pastor Andrew today. My name is Pastor Bobby, and today we're going to be jumping into how to think about year-end giving as a pastor. Some real high-level principles in terms of just the way that we think about this, the way that we plan this, and then some super practical insights. You know, even if you're listening to this, we're recording in the fall. Maybe you're listening to it some other time of the year. You know, maybe you want to go back to this or whatever. This is important for the whole year, but it's especially important at the end of the year. You know, when you're thinking about generosity, discipleship, stuff around that. You know, in some ways, when I think about it, you know, for the end of the year, I think people just naturally, they think about giving and finances more, I think for a number of different reasons. One, for a lot of people, they're getting raises at the end of the year, or it's being communicated to them what they're going to make for the next year. If they own their own business, they're starting to think about those things. Some people maybe get bonuses. People are starting to think about their taxes, filing their taxes for the upcoming year. So it's just kind of a natural time. It's when a lot of other nonprofits talk about giving and generosity. So it's one of those things where it's going to happen either way, that people are going to be thinking about this stuff. And even if you do nothing, I would guess for 99% of churches, your giving is going to be higher in December than any other time of the year. So if that's the case, you might as well be thinking about it and think about how to do it, you know, the best way. And the first thing, just in terms of intro, and we could both speak to this, is you really need to understand the why that you're doing this. And, you know, it's easy to kind of miss this sometimes, not because we want to, but, you know, you just do some of the same things year after year, and it's easy to kind of forget, man, okay, why are we actually, as pastors, talking about generosity, talking about money, trying to encourage people to be generous? And one of the reasons is, you know, it really is something that we want for people, you know, that they would have generous hearts more than we just want something from them. Man, we just want more money from people. We want the budget to be bigger. Speak to that a little bit, just in terms of like the discipleship.
Yeah,
side.
even to go back for just 1 second, like I think you're exactly right about it's going to happen at the end of the year, whether you seize upon that momentum or not. It's a lot like we talked about with big days, you know, like most churches are going to be a lot bigger on Easter than they are on a normal Sunday. That's true. I don't care if you're in California or Northeast. I mean, that's just true. But churches that see that as a momentum opportunity and seize upon it and really invest in it, you know, they might 2x, you know, what they were the previous week, you know, so everybody's going to bump just because the culture's giving you that. But then as churches get, you know, more serious in terms of their investment into that big day, they see a lot more of an outsized return. I think the end of the year giving initiative is very similar to that. I think most churches, well, without even trying, they just kind of they could fall backwards into our giving is higher at the end of the year. People are mission-minded at the end of the year. A lot of people that have traditions like Lottie Moon, those types of things, they're sort of conditioned towards an end of the year kind of generous December idea. And that can either happen to you, you know, as a church, or you can really leverage it for exactly what you're talking about, the true heart of generosity. We say on this podcast a lot, and we tell our staff and our church a lot, you know, God has designed the discipleship process to where what takes you the deepest is what takes the ministry the farthest. And there is an inherent link between our generosity and God's movement. And we just see it time and time again, you know, as people bring their first fruits to the Lord, and he says, I'm going to honor that, you know, and your barns will be filled and your vats will be filled. And, you know, we give in a response to what God has done for us. Mm-hmm. And, you know, a lot of the New Testament is written toward this, trying to get the people that Paul is writing to kind of open their hearts to generosity, to see people in the church taken care of, to see the mission funded, you know, to teach the rich to be rich in good works, you know, by giving. So there's a lot around all this that is just a big spiritual, you know, it's a spiritual input, not just, you know, we need the money for the mission. But what ends up happening is, in the economy of God's kingdom, as people give and they go deep spiritually, we have more money to be able to do the ministry. And as Chris Hodges said, the ministry normally goes about as far as the generosity of God's people takes it.
Yeah, and a lot of younger pastors end up kind of falling into this because, I've met over the years many church planners that they kind of knowingly don't talk that much about money or generosity on the front end because they feel like it's going to hurt them and they feel like it's going to hurt their witness with newer people, but they get a couple years in and they realize, man, we've done a disservice to people. And obviously it's very important for the church, just in terms of the budget, the vision, where the church is going. And so for us, that's why it is really important to start with the why. We're not just raising money here. What we're doing is trying to grow people's hearts, So like the mission of Mercy Hill, we want to make disciples and multiply churches. Another way that we say that in a little bit less of a kind of churchy way is like, man, we want to grow people to change the world. Now, if you want to grow somebody as a pastor, one of the best ways to do it, this is why the New Testament talks about money so much, is engaging their heart around money and generosity. Because if you get the heart, then somebody's really going to start growing. It's why Jesus says in Matthew 6:21, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. We always confuse that because we just think, man, wherever my heart is, then my money is going to follow that. And Jesus says, no, it's actually like the opposite. Wherever your treasure is, your heart is going to follow that. And so, in our culture, maybe more than any other, because people have so much money and so much wealth, just compared to the rest of the world. I know sometimes it doesn't feel that way, but it is so easy in our culture that money can provide security. It can help us to not fear the future. It can give us control over our lives. And all those things are supposed to be provided by God. And so we really have an opportunity to grow people's hearts, to change people's hearts as we talk about money and giving, and to not shy away from it. This is why Jesus talks about it so much. So that's really important.
I think too, man, for us, like I think you and I think you would agree with this. Like we've never shied away from talking about giving and money at Mercy Hill, like never. But I do think for probably the first half of our run here so far over 13 years, it was just because we had such a high drive for the mission. Right? It was like, man, I got no problem standing up and telling people to give. Number one, because I know what I'm doing. So I got no feels around it. And number two, because, man, I know if we're going to plant churches and we're going to grow and we're going to send people, which I care so much about, they're going to have to give and fund the mission. I think that now, we have a much better beat on, yes, that is true. That is right. That's good. But there's this whole other side of it, that is just straight up about the people that are being told, to be generous. It's like their heart and my heart and your heart as we give more, not just money, but our time, talent, treasure, open our everything we have up to the Lord, our kids, everything. It's like, man, that is growing us.
Right. So I'll jump into the first one. When we're thinking about, here's what we're going to do. We're going to give you kind of a framework for how we think about this, and then we'll end with the different types of people you need to be thinking about that are sitting in your church. Because all of us, no matter the size of the church, you have brand new people that are just considering doing this for the very first time, and maybe they're considering faith. And then you have people that you're trying to grow to a deeper level of generosity. So when we're thinking about year-end giving framework, the more important something is, the further out you think about it and the more depth you put into the way that you think about it. So if you're going to do some sort of year-end push really well, this isn't something you stumble into, Like you need to be thinking about it in September and October, and you need to be planning like, man,
right.
Are there going to be sermons, or is this just going to be a vision that we're going to cast? Are we going to tell stories of what God has done over the past year to help people see, man, your generosity, it's not just about growing your heart, it's also growing what God's doing in the mission. And so stuff like that, man, even a really good story that's really going to make the point and help people to see, discipleship's word taught, life caught. Sometimes that stuff just takes time, How many times have we last minute been like, man, we're 3 days away and we need a really good story on this. And it's like, man, stuff like that, you got to be baking that stuff sometimes for a really long time. And like for you leading this, you need to be thinking about it for sometimes a couple months ahead of time, because sometimes it just takes a little while to think about, okay, how exactly am I going to communicate it this year? Like, how am I going to package this stuff? Because it's not like you're presenting something different than you've already been doing, and we're going to get into that.
Yeah.
But each year you are kind of maybe turning the diamond a little bit in terms of where the church is at, where the church has been, where we're going to go. So the first one is just like, man, you just got to do the pre-work. You know how it is with preaching. Like, man, the more time and energy and thought you put into it, a lot of times the better the outcomes are going to be, because most of us are not just naturally gifted, right? Where we just wake up and know what to say for 5 straight weeks, encouraging people to give.
Right.
You're kind of you're leading this. I mean, anything you would add to that?
I think it's good to maybe give guys, right now, if they're like, man, I'm so head down. I've never thought about this. I want to think about it. I agree with you guys, but I've never done it. What does that look like? And I'm like, man, okay, I'm about to tell you. Grab a pen real quick, and I'll tell you. I think generally when you're thinking of the scheduling of this stuff, it's like, man, you want to come into the fall already sort of knowing where you're going in 26. You want to know sort of what the direction is of that little nuance, that 10%. 90% of what we do is always going to be the same. It's going to be, planting groups and churches, and it's going to be, doing a kids' week and Christmas. It's just all the same stuff, hiring, firing. You're going to be doing, just normal day in, day out stuff. But there's a flavoring to it. What are some things that are, and whether you tie them all together or not, we tie our stuff together. This year was all about age-based ministry. Had a big goal, 20% growth in age-based ministry. Next year, we're going to be doing something around the family. So want to tie some of that stuff together, but you need to have it in your mind enough to know what is the vision for the next year and what are some things that we are going to present to our people so they can make the connection between their giving and the mission. And so you need to have what those things are, 3, 4, 5 things for the next year, man. We're going to double our kids ministry, or we're going to do some kind of big camp, or we're going to take our first mission trip, or I don't know what it would be, size dependent on the church. But, like for us, we want to do something around church at the ballpark this year, bringing everybody together. We're going to do a marriage conference. It's like those things are going to be things that I'm able to say out loud to our people. And I need to have that in my mind, So that needs to be that needs to be, you got to have that by September. In October and November, you're probably going to be doing some things that gather some different groups of people that are going to hear about the vision for the next year early. So that may be dinner, you may do a couple of dinners or something like that, where you invite some different couples in that or that you want to get to know more, and try to, show them kind of where the church is going. I think it's just a good habit of bringing some people in, group leaders, that type of stuff. And then, you're probably going to have some kind of vision night, maybe in November, where you're bringing everybody together. It's a big worship event. You're talking about the vision for 26. And then probably second week of November, and this is what guys sometimes don't have the stomach for. They think like, well, I already said it. Probably the first or second week of November, all the way through the very end of the year, every single weekend, the announcement time for the services is going to be completely dominated by the vision for 26 and the things that we are hoping to see happen. We're going to talk about this, if we get a future investment, if we get a first fruits offering by the end of the year, so for us, I think it's probably going to be $2 million. We're hoping to see over $2 million or something like $2.5 million. Some churches that might be $20,000, whatever it is. We're trying to say to the church, guys, seeing that come in at the end of the year is going to help enable us to do X, Y, and Z. Those announcement times are going to be stories from the previous year that God has done awesome things. They're also going to be stories, and they're going to be graphs and charts and vision books and things like that for the next year of the things that we are wanting to do. And we're going to hammer that all the way through. There'll be a big section about it in our Christmas services. Right. We're going to, every single weekend, we're going to come all the way through the end of the year. And the only nuance I would give is, for some guys, I think it would be really important to actually take 2 or 3 of their sermons in November and December and actually preach 2 or 3 full sermons on that. We've done that sometimes. We're not going to do that this year. We're going to be in a different series, but that would be another way to try to cast a vision. So if you were, if you're like, hey man, I've never done it before. Okay, get the vision, September, communicate the vision early, October. Man, communicate the vision widely. Vision night in November plus every single service. That's your announcement time all the way through the end of the year. Maybe preach on it a few times. That's kind of a general framework.
Right. And when you think about that bucket, I think it's real important with the stories and stuff to make sure we understand. Like the Bible talks about giving being an investment into the kingdom. The Bible talks about being shrewd as we think about giving. And so I say that to say, and I'm going to say it like in just kind of a crass way, like people want to give to winners. Like people don't want to give to losers. And so you can just imagine, like if you went to some nonprofit banquet, not even church, just something else, right? In the previous year, they said, hey, we got a 5-fold vision of these 5 things we want to do. And then they come back the next year and they say, hey guys, I just want to let you know we failed at all 5. Right. We didn't make any progress towards these 5. But hey guys, we really need you to jump in to give to the upcoming year. Anybody listening to this would be like, I'm not totally sure about that.
Right.
If you really believe in it, maybe you'd be like, okay, I'll give them another year. But you want to be able to show people. I know church is not winning or losing, but you want to be able to show people, hey, you know, the vision that you're given towards last year, man, listen to this story of, man, you know, somebody's life that God changed, or you know, God got this person into community or whatever it may be. That's why the stories and stuff are so important, to help people to see, man, like God's doing the work and He's doing it through your generosity.
Right.
You know, because sometimes when churches think about giving, it's more like, man, we're failing, and please give to help us to not fail anymore. And man, just the natural inclination of the heart is going to be like, man, I'm not sure about that, you know.
Right.
Because people that think well about their money and God's blessed them in that area, they're thinking, man, I want to be shrewd.
Right.
God's given me what He's given me. I want to put it to a place where we're going to see some sort of spiritual return.
Yeah, because our whole pitch is like, man, we really believe this, that, you know, there's going to be an outsized spiritual return on the investment. Mm-hmm. You know, that if people are generous and they give, that God's going to do tenfold spiritually with that gift. And so we want to be able to show them that.
Right. Yeah. So let's think about packaging the vision. You know, we led a cohort that finished way earlier in this year, or maybe it even finished last year, but we did a whole cohort session around this type of stuff, you know, preparing, and it was right around this time of year where all these churches were preparing for their year in giving. And man, just thinking about it more strategically,
right.
I don't know, there was maybe 5 or 6 churches. Every single one of those churches saw the largest offering they'd ever seen in December. And a lot of it was because of point number 2 here. They just did a good job of packaging the vision. They put more effort, more thought into it, more staff hours to it, and they saw a return from it.
But it's funny because like people might look at that and say, well, man, how gimmicky is that? You guys are selling that you can get people to give more at the end of the year. It's like, yeah, but how? And all we're doing is saying like, man, get really good at setting up remembrance stones, you know, to look at God's past faithfulness. So be good at that, and then be really good at calling people to huge faith for what He's going to do the next year. So it's not quite like gimmicky, you know, it's sort of just like big faith in the past, big faith in the future. And it just seems like, man, God, you know, is honored by the big prayers and people respond to it. And, you know, so I don't think it's really gimmicky at all, man. It's just being like good at what we're trying to do, you know? It's like it's like being, you know, to using everything we can to glorify God in our life, whether it's videos, whether it's stories, whether it's print material, to get people to see God has worked in big ways and He wants to work in big ways.
I think anybody that preaches understands that it's not gimmicky, because anybody that preaches could stand up without preparation and preach. You know, anybody with enough experience could go preach almost any passage with no preparation, but everybody prepares because they know, man, it's just going to be better if I put some preparation into this.
Right.
You know, so what does it look like? Just talk around this. Like, what does it look like to kind of package the vision for people?
Yeah, I think you want to give people handles. That's the best way to think about it. You know, like it's one thing to say, hey guys, we need to put some money in our campus infrastructure. It's another thing to say, hey guys, one of our campuses has an opportunity to become a real hub in its community if we tear down the playground that is there, rebuild something really nice, make sure it's shaded, give moms a chance to be missional by inviting people to come out because it's just in a really ideal location. And we think that's a huge investment in families in that campus and them being missional. Those are 2 totally different things. You know, one of them, they're both literally this, you know, true. It is a campus, you know, infrastructure sort of upgrade, But the other one is, man, making people feel it, you know? It's not just we're going to the promised land. It's telling people what it's going to feel like when we get there. There's going to be milk and honey and giant grapes and all the rest, you know? So I think that number one, it's just giving people handles to try to think through, okay, I get what you're saying. Like hey, next year we're giving to multiplication. It's like, okay, I got it. Or you say, hey guys, next year we're giving to multiplication. And one of those, things that we're given to is Travis and Molly, and look at their story, and Declaration Church, and man, hey, come on up. We got a launch team member just signed a covenant last week. They're in, their giving's now going to Declaration. They're on board. They're leaving in 6 months. Hey, tell us your story. Those are just two totally different things. One of them is the truth. It's multiplication. The other one is we have taken a lot of time to think about the hook and how people can oh, now I get it. And so I think that packaging up the vision that way is very important. You said it earlier too. People give the vision instead of need. You were saying winners and losers, but I think it's the same idea. It's like, hey, we want to cast something for the next year that is bigger than any of us could do individually. That kind of sweeps us up into. Now we can't control it, and we've had things that we were praying for that don't happen. And we have to. Hey man, this wasn't in the cards. We had to make a decision here or something like that. But trying hard to cast a vision that people can kind of be swept up in because they can imagine a world in which God is working in an incredible way.
Yeah, and the reason for us that we use typically kind of a one fund idea, so hey, every dollar you give, it's, we're highlighting certain things, but you're giving to one fund. You're not giving to the missions fund and the multiply fund and the building fund, because what can happen when you do that, and I'm not saying every church that does that, this is their heart, but what can happen is you present it hey, there's this really exciting stuff here, and then there's this necessary evil stuff that we have to do over here to kind of keep the lights on. And you hear this where people critique, especially larger churches, man, how much money is going out of the church, or how much money is going here, or how much money, and we just kind of reject that outright. We say, hey, our mission is to make disciples and multiply churches. So if an extra student staff person, that can meet with more students and lead more of them to take that decision of baptism, if that's going to help, or a nicer building is going to help, or anything else is going to help, none of that is necessary evil. We wouldn't do it if we didn't think it was leading to the mission going forward. So I think that's important of a one fund because people even have that in their minds, right? Well, I want to know how many dollars are going, and it's man, that's just totally every dollar is going towards the mission that we have.
Right.
And if you're real clear on the mission, it's hey guys, if you got an issue and you're not about seeing people, discipled and baptized and sent out, then maybe you need to give somewhere else or be connected somewhere else. But that's what we're doing. Yeah,
it's kind of the problem why I think people can really, get confused when you start saying this, when you define discipleship as just this one-on-one mentoring situation or whatever. It's what we try to do is say, man, discipleship is all of it. It's all of it, man. It's people that were caring for you when you were a kid in kids ministry. It's Sunday school teachers. It's groups. Man, it's having a building for the students to meet in. It's having a mission trip. It's staff. It's just all of those things are contributing to spiritual maturity in people's lives. And, if you can kind of think about it less like a bunch of segments and more like one engine, I think it's just really helpful. I think another thing too, people can get real high and mighty about this because they're well, look how much the church is spending on this or that, without realizing, man, just, the most expensive things don't make them the most important things.
Right.
It just meant that they were the most expensive, Right. I think about that in my life. If I tallied up all the vehicles that we have now from Anna and Hattie Joe and me driving, and that's a lot of money. That's more money than I'm going to spend on, for example, them to go to school. I would say them going to school is more important.
Right.
The cars are just more expensive, So, we don't want to get in that little conference-y trap where it's look at the church's budget and they're only spending 10% on, it's okay, I get that.
You're totally missing it. So number 3, it's very similar to number 2 in packaging the vision, but you want to frame the vision in a way that helping people see that it aligns with the higher mission and vision of the church. That, you brought up 10%. Because what some people can do is, at the end of every year, it feels like this herky jerky,
Yeah.
Like, man, the church was going this direction and now we got this big giving thing and now we're going this direction. And people, that's maybe exciting for 1 year, but if it feels like that year after year. So for us, it's like, hey, remember, we're going in the same direction we were last year. Man, here's the 10-year, here's where we're going, here's our mission. Let me tell you about some stuff for this year that's going to help us get there. You just kind of framing it the right way.
Yeah, the vision frame itself that we've referenced, is that idea of like, hey, the stuff inside the frame changes around. There's different goals, but you try to, through like your values and your roadmap and your actual mission statement, you try not to have that all moving around. I think sometimes the guys confuse they get like their goals and what they're hyped on, and that can end up being, really confused with what their brand is, their actual brand of church. We've done work around this. I mean, I would say we are like a big box sending brand. I mean, we're just like, hey, dude, we're kind of inviter friendly. We're into buildings and into big worship music, but there's an element to that is very sending focused, where the biggest and most important things to us are church planting and sending missionaries. And if all of a sudden we just came out next year and we just said, hey guys, the whole sending thing, no. That was a previous dispensation of God's. We're not doing that anymore, man. Now, guys, it's all about the city. It's all about the homeless. It's all about racial reconciliation. It's all about, and it's like, man, we're going city. I mean, our church would just feel like, man, we just took the biggest U-turn, left turn that has ever been. Because they'd be right. It's like, man, we've got this frame that doesn't really move. Like, this is who we are. I'm not saying you couldn't change all that. You could, but for us, it's like, hey, that's really going outside of our framework of who we are. Who we are is going to do more things around, hey, we're gonna plant a church next year. We're gonna get more involved in adoption ministry because that's a big thing for our church. Like we're gonna talk more about families. And so we want to do things in the next year that are in line with kind of our brand, with kind of who we are, rather than, throwing all that out the window and just chasing something radically new.
Yeah. The last thing in terms of just like how we think of planning this, one of the questions people are naturally going to ask is, man, what is the timeline of this money that you're asking me to give? Is this going, to pay off something in the past? Is it going to, for this month of December that we're in? Is it going to something in the future? And the best you can, you want this to be as future-oriented as you can.
Right.
I've seen churches in the past, there's nothing wrong with this because sometimes this is the position you're in, but I've seen churches do big like 2-year initiatives that are mainly around like paying off debt. Mm-hmm. And it's like, man, the timeline of that is basically paying off something that we already did in the past.
Right.
And that's a harder vision to cast than, hey guys, we're not behind in something. We're not paying something off in the past. What we're talking about is giving to fuel something that's going to happen in the future.
Right. Yeah. I mean, just think about how much more motivating that is, to think about what God is about to do rather than, trying to go backwards. And yeah, we try to sell it as a first fruit. It's like, hey, and we really mean it. Like the way that December rolls out for us, like year in and year out, that's going to set the pace at which we can attack the goals for the next year. So if December is really lackluster, we're probably going to have to like wait and pause some things until our cash flow can, fund whatever some of that stuff is that's early in the year. So like for us next year, we're going to be doing a bunch of stuff around chosen ministry. We're going to be doing this marriage conference, all that kind of stuff. Well, man, if basically this December, if all that came into the church was what we needed to cover December's budget, a lot of that stuff would have to get pushed off. And we'd have to just say, hey man, we're not going to do it, or we're going to have to do it later, at a much later time in the year.
Yeah. So let's kind of transition. All right. You're planning for the year end, like who are you talking to in the church? And I think it's important to think about this. I think this almost applies to anything that you're going to do. Like, man, you're trying to get people to read their Bible. You're trying to get more people into community groups. You're trying to get people to go on mission. You're kind of always going to be talking to 3 different groups of people. You're going to be talking to people that are brand new. Either they're just like brand new to your church or like they're spiritually brand new. You're going to be talking to people that, man, they get it, but they need some more consistency around this in their life. And then you're going to be talking to people that, man, they need to take a step to go a lot deeper
Yep.
in this. So maybe you just kind of start with the first one. We got to always keep this in mind, because if you don't have these categories, you naturally, some guys are just like evangelists, right? They're really good talking to the new. There's other people like, man, they're really good at getting people to go way deeper. We're always going to have all three of these
Right.
groups of
And
people.
historically, we've been better at talking to people that are already in
Yep.
than new people. And I think we've gotten a lot better at it. I think when you're talking to first-time givers, you want to make sure that you're setting up what is the reality. You don't want to misspeak, around their opportunity to affect things. So if what you do every week is you stand up and you thank people who give because look how awesome the church is and look what God did through this or that, you're subtly telling all the new people in the room they don't need me, they're doing fine. Now that's problematic for two reasons. Number one, God really don't need your money. It's really about your discipleship, and you're giving them that message of like letting them off the hook, which God wants to do something in their heart. But then the second thing is that's just not really true. Like we want to be able to do more. And so we want to have a vision gap. Hey, this is where we're at. It's awesome. But can you imagine, if you were to come in and be, if all of us took a step in generosity, what we would be able to do. And I think that you want to give them a roadmap of how they can get there. I think that I've had this internal debate, do we call people to the tithe immediately? And I think ultimately, yes, because that is kind of, I think for us, that's sort of the starting place, really. But for some people, that's going to feel so huge. Mm-hmm. And so it's like many other things in the Christian walk. It's like, man, we want them to be in a group, but maybe they need to go to starter groups first. We want them to serve, but maybe they need to kind of get in and make sure their kids are okay and be here for 6 months before they do. We in an ideal world, we think they're going to grow the fastest if they just jump into all this stuff, but not everybody's going to do that. So trying to give them some language around, we use Nelson Searcy's generosity journey or generosity ladder. We've used that for a long time, but just that idea of like, man, give something.
Right.
Start giving in a consistent way, even though it's not a tithe. Man, finally get to that place where you're tithing, and then finally, hey, we're going to go beyond the tithe, and then eventually we're going to get into legacy.
Right. Yeah, and I would say in many ways this is maybe the hardest one, because the Bible presents, man, the first thing we should be willing to give
Right.
God is our money. But naturally, for your church, this is the last thing people are going to be willing
Right.
to give you. Like, man, they may give you some time. They may give you some of their gifts. They may get in a group. They may give you their kids, to go to kids ministry or students or whatever. But man, their money is probably going to be the last thing they're going to give you. And so you just gotta keep that in mind.
Yeah.
You got to work on people's hearts, and maybe it's, hey, they don't respond to the year-end giving, but they stay around, and 3 or 4 months later they're like, okay,
we're gonna
I
give
can
something.
I can trust the organization. I'm gonna start somewhere. The second one, and this one is very important, because man, this just gets back to discipleship. Success in life and growing spiritually and just being a disciple, man, it doesn't come just through some really big decision. It comes through daily, weekly, monthly. It's like, man, in the book of Daniel, the reason Daniel could be faithful after many, many, many years, some big, huge act of faithfulness, it's because of all the small acts of,
Right.
man, I'm going to pray, I'm going to be faithful. And so, man, this is the work of discipleship, to try to, because you got people that are like, man, I agree I should be giving. I agree it's important for the heart. I want to do that, but they're just not consistent for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Maybe they're scared, maybe they're not good with their money. And so you got to help them, because it's going to be good for them. Like, man, this ain't about getting the most amount of money from them.
Right.
This is the best thing, that they're going to go from just being a once-off sort of generosity person at Christmas to being a generous person week in, week out.
Yeah, for sure.
As the lead communicator, any sort of just like tips or?
Yeah, I mean, I just think that we really battle complacency, I mean, I battle it. We have a lot of people at Mercy Hill that are brand new. We have a lot of people at Mercy Hill that are mature and have been Christians. They're veterans, man. They've been doing this for 30 or 40 years. It's easy to get to a place where you feel comfortable. You've automated your giving. You don't even see it. You don't feel it. It's just another bill you kind of pay, and you understand it. It's like, hey, I see that the church does all the stuff that it does that I love, and that don't happen without money, So it's not, I mean, it ain't like rocket science. People are like, yeah, I'm going to give. I want to give. And, but maybe they're just settled into a complacent complacency. I think 2-year initiatives are really good to help with that in a church. But I think that at the end of the year, that person that I'm talking about is somebody we need to have on our mind to try to engage them and rattle them and shake them a little bit to say, man, is this an area of your life that you're willing to pick back up and wrestle with? Or is it something that you've kind of put down a long time ago?
Right. The third group of people is, we just say kind of, man, thinking more about like high capacity giving. And we don't just mean like, man, somebody that is more high capacity, but that could be the case. I mean, the Bible talks about being people that are rich and warning them and, but it could also just mean, we have a lot of these people in our church now, almost just over 13 years in. Man, they came to our church right out of college. Maybe they were 24 years old. They got a decent job, and they were faithful to give. And they faithful to consistently give. But what God's done in their life over the last 13 years is kind of outsized their giving.
Right.
Man, maybe their net worth has gone up by 10. God's given them tremendous influence. Right. They're leading a business. The amount of wealth and money that God has given them has increased like crazy. And their giving and generosity has not kept up with that. Yeah. And so it's not, hey, we're just trying to get the most, from them or whatever. It's like, no, I mean, God will hold them accountable. Yeah. For, did he give them 5 or 2 or 4 or whatever? And so it's important to engage people around that. We can engage people like that one-on-one. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's certain things that you could say in a sermon. And the other thing is like, man, there just literally are very high capacity people that are at your church. And I don't care what size the church is. Some of them are given in a high capacity way. Some of them are not given in a high capacity way at all. Right. But God has clearly, in terms of like stewardship, blessed them in a really unique way, maybe because the business they have or their job or whatever. So, man, we're not perfect at this, but we try in this. So maybe speak to some of the things that we try to do or just how to talk about it.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing is just like not being afraid of the conversation, of realizing, man, in the economy of God's kingdom, he has set it up to where it seems like there are people who can make an outsized effort with their contribution. It does, man. It's what does God want from all of us in terms of our heart? He wants equal sacrifice. It's not about equal money. Look at the widow's mite, Right. And it's all his anyway. I mean, he doesn't need us. He doesn't need our money. But I do think that just in the economy of the way that the organization runs and the way that like the church, does mission and funds, the mission. Yeah, it's just clear. Like, man, there are going to be people that God brings in, and he has probably gifted them not only with the ability to make money, but probably spiritually gifted them in generosity to be able to give it away. And those two things don't always go together. They go together sometimes, maybe the majority of the time. And yeah, I just think we need to have mechanisms to call them forward. I mean, it's really no different. I think because it's about money, people immediately say, well, you don't want to usher someone to the front because they have money. And it's like, oh, wait, no, what we're talking about doing is asking them to be more sacrificial than other people. So this is not about like getting a parking space for them or, we're not talking about that or dishonoring a poor person when they come in that's not, this is just about, hey, if I see a guy at 17 or 18 or 19 years old that has he's just a crack shot leader, great preacher, like, man, I'm going to grab that dude and I'm going to say, hey, I want you to come walk with me. I'm probably going to give an outsized amount of my energy and time there because I see there's a big impact. We do that with community group leaders. It's like, hey, once a year, every community group leader in our church is like sent, on a retreat. And it's, man, we pay for the whole thing. We go preach at it. We do worship. We do fun stuff. Man, we try to like heap, just honor on them because of what they do, and equip them also. So it's like for every area of the church where you see gifting, there's something that the church needs to do to like recognize it and also try to pour into it. And I think sometimes guys they just miss that part when it comes to people who have been gifted in generosity and want to be able to give in big ways because they're just scared of it. And I think we just try not to be scared of any of the giftings that God has given people. And, if there are ways that we can call them forward, I have no problem. You've heard me in sermons say, hey man, there's people in here that can give a 7-figure gift, like, man, I'm calling you out. You can do that.
That I think is the biggest point. Like I remember reading a stat like a bunch of years ago it was a generosity thing with all nonprofits, and so it was looking at like some of the largest generosity initiatives like in the United States, so give into some museum in New York or whatever. And I think the stat was to every single one of these initiatives, no matter the size, 50% of the giving was from like 10 people,
Right.
which is crazy. Like $300 million initiative and 10 people gave 50%. It was something like that. And so what I would tell guys is like, man, you need to speak in a way that makes an assumption that there could be some of these people here.
Right.
Because man, you're not gonna know or not. You know what I mean? You could be some little country church and you got some really blue collar looking guy that's like very wealthy. And by just talking about it, not like we're always talking about rich people or something, but just like, hey, you could give some of you can give an outsized gift because God's given you.
Yeah.
That sometimes just, man, light bulb turns on for people.
Yeah, it's not gimmicky. It's just like, man, Paul told Timothy, teach the rich, to be rich in good works. It's like, well, he must have talked to the rich.
Right.
I mean, if there's no way to do that unless you're willing to say, hey, and now I'm not saying it's got to be one-on-one but some kind of way that's got to be engaged to just acknowledge what you're saying, that the economy of God's kingdom has never been, it's very capitalist. I mean, it's not, everybody doesn't have the same, whether it's gifting, whether it's money, God's given us all a matrix of things. And, to be able to ask people to give in proportion to what they've been given, I think that's right.
Yeah, that's great. Man, any last thoughts? I mean, I think in just conclusion, like just reminding ourselves, because man, if you're a good leader, like you want to win, like you want to do well by your church, you want the church to grow, but just to remember, like, man, this ultimately is about discipleship,
Yeah.
So starts with our own hearts. We need to be doing what we're calling other people to do, and to know, man, it's not like, yeah, people giving and the church advancing, like that's amazing. But more than anything, man, I want these people to grow. That's why I'm their pastor.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, I think these 4 ideas, man, scheduling, knowing the schedule. I love the idea of a schedule because if we really believe that generosity is such a key component of discipleship, if you're not in the 2-year game, then having something baked in at the end of the year, it's just like, man, it helps me to remember to engage this because people need it. We need it and people need it, So I love the idea of having the schedule. We already laid out what that is, packaging the vision. Don't let that vision start jumbling up the frame of what you are. Remember who you are, put it inside of that. And, don't bill our giving in December as something that's making up for the past. It's really a future investment. It's a seed going into the ground. We're going to see how God can take it the next year. I think these are 4 really good components of a good year-end generosity initiative.
Awesome. Hey, thanks guys for listening. Hey, I'd encourage you to jump into our Facebook group. If you're not, man, people ask questions in there. We're always trying to share resources. So we certainly could share some stuff around this. Thanks guys.